maybe we could start by just arriving. So if it's comfortable, perhaps just closing your eyes and allowing your attention to maybe drop down into the body as a way of maybe settling the mind a bit, calming ourselves, and potentially letting go of thoughts of the past and worries of the future. So allowing the attention to drop down from the head, and maybe you can instead center it at the area of your heart, the location of the heart chakra at the center of the chest. And see if you can just gently breathe into your heart. And while doing so, see if you can connect with whatever intention you have for joining this class. So hopefully there will be some something in this class that will help you deal more skillfully with all the stuff that's present in your life. Work with the things that's causing suffering and discontent and problems. Maybe be better able to deal with those things, and from that develop more clarity, more happiness, more contentment, more reality-based wisdom, and more reality-based compassion for yourself and for others. And maybe also tapping into an altruistic intention of being of benefit. So whatever you pick up along the way, whatever you're able to implement in your own life, to whatever extent you're able to wake up and open your heart and your mind, to that extent you'll also be able to be of benefit to others and help alleviate the suffering and promote the happiness of all those you come into contact with. And potentially somewhere along the line, all sentient beings. Okay, and then having tapped into that type of motivation, we can kick things off. Okay, so I don't know if it was last session or the one before that. I talked a little bit about a way of viewing what's going on in our minds as I talked about there being a bunch of teams in there. So rather than us having this unitary view of our psyche, seeing it as, there's like different, a neuroscientist would say that there are different processes in the brain that are parallel and kind of have different responsibilities. So for example, there would be like the worry team, who's concerned about mitigating threats and kind of in charge of anxiety, and they have their suggestions. And then there might be the anger team who is in charge of protecting us from dangers, and they will have their suggestions. And we don't necessarily have to we should listen to all the teams and treat them with respect and know that they're doing their best in our own interest, but we don't necessarily have to listen to them and take their advice. So I just suggested that as a way of relating to our experience. But then I also said that, so even though we have all these teams, and in Buddhist psychology, you might call them mental factors or what it might be, but so we have all these teams, but there is no CEO. So there is not the one in charge there. And I said that it would be interesting to kind of come back to that idea and explore that a little bit further. So that's what I thought we could do today. And this is, of course, the Buddhist concept of no self. And fundamentally, all the suffering we experience, all the problems we have, all stem from the single misunderstanding about the nature of our own identity. So we believe in this, CEO. It's like we have this sense of there being a little mini me somewhere inside, and that's the owner of all our experiences, and is also the one calling the shots, making the decisions, and who is the owner of everything that's going on. So I don't know. Can I see all of you? Raise of hands if you have that sense of a little mini me inside of you, who's the boss, who's the owner of all the suffering, and this is also the one that always needs to be better. If we have this little critical self-talk, it's about this little mini me that should really get its act together and shape up and do better. But so it's interesting. And then one image that comes to me is, I don't know if there any of you watched ever watched Star Trek, or maybe you have a general idea about what it is. But so in the original one, there's the captain's name is Kirk, and they fly around on this starship going across the different galaxies. But the starship has this bridge, and the bridge has a view screen where that's where they interact with the world around them. So this mini me is kind of like that like the Captain Kirk standing or sitting, I guess, on the bridge and viewing this view screen, and then calling the shots, telling the crew what to do. And that's kind of like a metaphor for this little mini me. And another word I like for the mini me is the narrative self, because it is just woven out of stories, out of concepts, out of narrative. It's not, if you start looking for it, which I thought we would do in the meditation today, you actually can't find it. So in Buddhist psychology, it would be called self-grasping. Another sometimes obvious name for it would be ego, using a term from Western psychology. I try to avoid ego because it has all these connotations attached to it. So I like narrative self. I like mini me because it's kind of a silly word, but it really captures the sense that we have of ourselves. And for most people, it's like we live inside the head. I would say that's the experience of 95% of us. Like, we're inside the head somehow, and that's probably because we're so centered around the idea of everything happening in the brain. So we feel like we're inside here somewhere, looking out through our eyes. But so what is the question, or what's the problem rather with having this? What's the problem with the mini me, other than it's not real? So the problem is that so if we take an example, maybe unpleasant experience. Say we have a strong physical pain in one of our legs, So if we were to look into that pain with like deep awareness, we would see that this is, these are sensations arising in our awareness. It might be tightness or heat or vibration or pressure. So if we actually go deeply into the pain, that's what it consists of. And there's not in just the plain sensation of pain, there is not necessarily any suffering. So the pain is there, but the suffering is something additional that we put on top of the pain through the stories and the narratives that we spin. So we superimpose onto our experience of pain this owner of those experiences, this mini me that lives in our head that owns the pain. And then to the mini me, the pain is just not, raw sensations floating in the space of awareness. It's something that the mini me owns, because the mini me has the body, and the mini me owns the mind. It's kind of standing separate from the body and the mind. And then all these problems arise because what does this pain mean to me? It's so unfair that I'm having this pain. It's so unfair to me. And what will happen to me in the future if I keep having this pain? It might affect my relationships and my career, and I will never be content, and it will always be with me, and it's horrible for me. So at the center of this narration is now the mini me, and the stories that is spun around it is what's actually creating the suffering. So the Dalai Lama often says that pain is mandatory. It's just part of living, but suffering is optional. And at the center of all suffering is always this conceptual idea of the owner of the experience. So I don't know, does that make sense? And I guess we can always look into our experience and see whenever we're suffering, at the core of it, we'll find this little narrative self, this mini me. And I was reminded of like an interesting experience I had when I was a kid, just in relation to suffering, or pain rather, in relation to pain. So I remember when sometimes you're a kid, you touch a stove or something and you burn your fingers. And I remember when I did that, it was just terrible. And I used to walk around with my fingers in cold water, and woe be me, poor me, my fingers are hurting, and it would just go on and on. And I remember my aunt, who was actually she's a meditation teacher, not in a Buddhist tradition, but anyway, so she told me that, well, instead of trying to distance yourself from the pain, try doing the opposite and try going really deeply into it. So just approach it rather than trying to, keep it at a distance. So rather than making a problem out of it, just see if you can experience it fully. And I tried that. And what I found was that the next time when I had a burn on my hand or my finger or whatever it was, I did exactly this. And to my great surprise, the pain pretty much went away, which was completely fascinating to me. It was like, like my brain was trying to alert me to the fact that there was a problem with my finger. And then as soon as I acknowledged this and just, took it in fully, it was like my brain said, okay, I've let you know, I've done my job. It's all good. But as long as I was trying to distance myself from it, the pain would just linger and stay on. And I don't know if it was probably the physical sensations of the pain. They were probably the same, but my experience of it, the suffering this pain was causing me, was just completely shifted from the way I related to it. And I think if you do that, if you really go into the raw sensations of pain, you're kind of cutting out the whole story, the whole narrative, the whole mini me, and you're just experiencing things more as they actually are, more raw. And young as I was, I found that to be very helpful. And it goes the other way as well. It's just not just the pain and the unpleasant experiences. So it's also the pleasant experiences and the things that we do appreciate and like. So the mini me, this narrative self, it wants to attach itself and embellish itself with possessions and with reputation, with power, with pleasurable experiences, because all those things has a narrative meaning to it. And the mini me wants to present itself in a good way to the world. It's very very important how it's being viewed by others, and then that causes us to run around chasing all the things that will improve the story and embellish the narrative self, and believing that those are the things that will bring us happiness, and then just chasing hedonic pleasures at the expense of doing meaningful things in our lives. So even just hankering after the good things is also a result of believing in the story of the narrative self and the mini me. Yeah, I think I'll just I'll pause briefly there and see if there are any questions or anything that came up from listening to that presentation. I have a little bit more to share, but I just wanted to check in and say what you're thinking. Does that all of that make sense?
We always say just unmute yourselves and go ahead. It's a small group, so you don't have to be formal. You don't even have to stay muted. Just go.
No, just make noise.
What you're saying, Martin, actually really resonates with me. I agree with you that oftentimes we have that false sense of the mini me or the false sense of the ego. And we feel like that is the deciding factor of what action we take or what words we use or what choices and decisions that we make. And I know for me, when I started looking at situations just as simply a positive or a negative, without judgment, from a place of observation, it made it a lot easier for me to really tune that inner me voice out.
Yeah.
Although I don't get it perfect all the time.
No, that's the mini me is extremely persistent, unfortunately.
Yes, that is the thing I was going to say. This is Alex. Hello, everyone. I've just joined you tonight. The thing I find about the mini me is it's incessant. It doesn't, it's really hard to shut it up for moments sometimes, or very focused effort, but it's just going and going.
Yeah. And I think one, because it's not going away anytime soon, unless you're just about to awaken to complete enlightenment here and now, then I think you're going to be stuck with a mini me for the foreseeable future. But I think perhaps we can change our relationship to it. So this little bugger is going to tag along and have all sorts of things to say. But as long as we think that the mini me is who we are, that's a bigger problem than if we just have this little, as I get this image, like Donald Duck, they used to have like this little angel, a little devil on the shoulders. So the mini me can be like sitting up in one of the shoulders going blah, 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 having opinions about everything and anything. but maybe we don't have to think that's us and fully identify with it. Because I guess to the extent that there is an us, it would be more realistic to identify with absolutely everything, because that is what has shaped us and caused us to have the experience that we're having in this moment. Rather than thinking that, okay, things turn out the way they do because the mini me made a free choice. It's more realistic to think that there's this network of an immense amount of causes and conditions that have coalesced, and that's what's creating my current experience, not the choices that I think I make completely freely. Because if that was the case, we could just choose to be happy, and then that would be the end of it. But we're not in control. We are conditioned, and there are a lot of causes and conditions. So I thought also I would, because I thought we'd do a meditation on I guess trying to find the mini me, see where it might be hiding. But I just wanted to touch on one thing, and that's that anytime we talk about a thing, so that thing, whatever it is, that is one, only exists as a mental label, as a concept, as a name, as a convention, as a projection. So I think one interesting example of this is, so if you consider the Milky Way, the galaxy that we're in. So we talk about the Milky Way as if it was one thing, but if you consider it, it's just billions and billions of stars and nebulas and supernovas, or whatever the stuff is, stardust and planets, and none of those things are the Milky Way. We just look at a bunch of stuff and then we say, oh, that's the Milky Way, and that's just a label. It's a name, it's a convention. So the Milky Way does not exist in any other way than as that name, as that label. And it's the same if we view ourselves as we could be a galaxy in smaller scale, because we also consist of billions of different things just floating around in space, basically. And onto that, this galaxy of phenomena, we project, in my case, Martin or me. And again, that me does not exist as a thing. It only exists as a mental label. Just as you can't find the Milky Way looking at any of the planets and the billions of things that onto which we project the idea of the Milky Way. It's the same with us. There's nothing within the multitude of billions of constituent parts here that is the me. That only exists as an idea, as a label, as a story, which is also why I like the term narrative self. The thing that you think you are is just a story. If we can fully grasp that idea, then we can start relating to ourselves in a very, very different way. So it isn't that the Milky Way doesn't exist. It does, but it only exists as a convention. And it isn't that the me doesn't exist. It's that it just exists as a story. And then, of course, if we had much more time than we have today, we could start drilling down and seeing that, okay, the Milky Way consists of planets, but then if you look at a planet, that's just a bunch of dust and stuff with the label planet on it. So also there is no planet other than as a concept, as a label. And then you drill down and down and down, and you never ever get to the thing that actually exists. There's no there's no end to the rabbit hole. So but I think that's a discussion for another time. I think today it'll be sufficient to know that on top of this conglomerate of body and mind, we place the label me. But if we start looking for that thing, that unitary, separate, concrete self, we won't be able to find it. And which is good, because if the cause of all our suffering and all our problems, all our discontent is this self, then it might be a really wonderful realization to see that it in fact doesn't exist. It only exists as a storyline, and it has no more reality than we give to it. Which again doesn't necessarily mean we can just snap out of our delusional way of viewing ourselves in the world, but at least we have identified where we need to look, and where we need to be really sharp and clear about things, and that gives us some direction of where to start looking to figure out not some of our problems, but ultimately all of them. Yeah, so I thought we can do a meditation, and see if we can go looking for the self and see if we can find it. And perhaps you've done something similar in the past, but this is one meditation that probably we should be doing every day, and just keep at it until we have convinced ourselves that, okay, this self that seems so obviously existent, it's very, very difficult to find anywhere, and that's got to mean something. Okay, so now let's see if we can just find a comfortable position. And perhaps you can close your eyes. And again, just return your attention to the body. If you want, you can rest your attention on the breathing. Just gently following the movements of the breath. And then let's see if we can locate the mini me, the one that we are so convinced that we are, the self. And what we're looking for is something that is somehow separate from the mind and separate from the body, because this me, it has a body, it's the owner of the body, and it has a mind. We speak about my body and my mind, so the owner seems to be not the body and not the mind, but rather somehow separate from them. So first, I would encourage you to turn your attention to your body. So the whole field of somatic sensations. And this is how the body exists for us. It exists as experiences in awareness, tactile sensations. So maybe if you bring your attention down to where the sit bone connects to the chair or whatever you're sitting on, you will feel some pressure there. The tactile sensation of pressure. Maybe there's some discomfort or pain in your body. Maybe your shoulder is hurting. So there will be the tactile sensations of pain. Maybe you feel a bit relaxed, so there's a pleasurable sensation in your stomach. Maybe if you feel into your hands, they feel nice. But whatever it is, there's this space of tactile sensations. So just become aware of those sensations, and then see if any one of these sensations qualifies as the mini me, as the self, as this separate entity who's making all the decisions and is calling all the shots, who's the owner of suffering and happiness. So the pressure from the chair that you can feel, is that the self? Or even the parts of your body that you just conceptualize, that you maybe can't feel, like say your liver. You haven't ever seen your liver, but it's a concept that you have in your mind. So is that the self? Could any one part of your body, could that be the mini me? So really make it a serious investigation. Really, really look. Or maybe it's the brain, that's part of your body. But then the brain has many parts. There's the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. So maybe the prefrontal cortex, is that the mini me? the right or left side of the prefrontal cortex, which one would it be? So we have such a strong self of being a self. So it should be very easy to find it. So which part of your body is it? Where is it? And then if you can't find it anywhere, just take note of that fact. You know, I've looked around and I couldn't really identify it. I couldn't really find it. And just take note of that fact, that realization or insight. And then you can instead turn your attention to your mind. So this space of mental appearances. So this space of thoughts and emotions and impulses and memories and images. So for example, you can, if you voluntarily generate the thought, I am meditating, for example. So just generate that thought in your mind and observe it. Just see it appear. So that thought just appeared in the space of your mind. Or bring to mind what you had for breakfast. So that might be tastes or smells or whatever the memory consists of. That memory just appeared in the space of your mind, in the space of your awareness. And if you keep watching that space, there will be many, many things appearing, like clouds in the sky, just popping into existence, staying for a while, and then disappearing again. And if you choose any of those mental appearances, you can ask, so is this thought about breakfast, is that the self? Is that the mini me? Or if you're feeling anxious or bored or content or whatever it is that anxiety? Is that the me? Is that the mini me, the narrative self, the separate person that's in charge? No, because an emotion is not a valid basis to impute a person upon. A thought is different from a person. It's different from a mini me. So just look around your mind for anything that would be the self. And if you don't find it, then just take note of that and realize that you looked and you didn't find. So maybe potentially you didn't look hard enough, or maybe it's hiding somewhere where you didn't look, but at least there's some indication that perhaps it isn't to be found because you tried your best, you went looking for it, and you couldn't find it. And then to end this meditation, just allow yourself to release all questions, all inquiry, all effort, and see if you can just rest for a while in the open space of your awareness. Okay, and with that, we can end this meditation and bring our attention back to each other, or I guess rather the computer in front of us, but yeah. Okay, so with that, I will open up for questions, observations, or anything that anyone would like to share.
Martin,
Mm-hmm.
do you think that this mini me, this inner voice, this is one of the reasons we find it so difficult to have compassion for ourselves? How we can, because we're always fighting that mini me. It's easier for us to have compassion for other people. And I think it was Venerable Rabina that once said that, if this person was sitting next to you, you try and give them good advice. But if that person is yourself, you're much harder on them. And I don't know whether that has any relevance to the inner voice, to the mini me always in the background.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, because whether it's narcissism or low self-esteem or self-criticism, self-hatred, they're all revolving around this story. They're all revolving around this entity who's either super duper or horrible. And many people, they're not very happy with their mini me, because they think it sucks. It's a horrible mini me. And if they could just kill it, they would, because it's so horribly, horribly bad. And they just want to beat it into submission. And of course, it's easy to see how that would create just a host of psychological problems and suffering. Yeah, which is also one of the reasons why I think the word ego is sometimes misleading, because it kind of takes us to the idea of more the narcissistic version than, you know, the horrible victim deficient version. Yeah, so I don't know if that did that make sense, or
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess the opposite could be true too. You get some people that are always so confident in everything that they do. So then we go to the other extreme.
yeah. And none of them are reality based or very realistic. Both of them are delusional. And both of them create problems. Yes. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Martin. I think one lady has her hand up there. You just go ahead, love.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, I think that Brian brings up a very interesting point, you know, regarding the ego and how that's it's always there and it's always attacking. You never really feel like the ego is being your cheerleader and, you know, going, hey, great hair day. You know, instead, you know, really, it seems like there's that part of you where it's like, you know, sorry, your grades don't match today. And there's always just the smallest negative or big negatives that go right there along with it. For me personally, within my life, within my career, what I had to do was really recognize that I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. And I am only as good as the resources I surround myself with. And I don't have to be an expert in anything. If there's anything that I need or a resource that I need for a student or for a client, you know, be the bridge that builds the resource. But that doesn't mean I have to know that information. But that mini me was really hard because there was a period of time there where it was like, I felt I had to be really front loading and over educated in every single area. And it just wasn't possible. And I felt like I was failing, like I was falling behind. And then it just kind of like, I realized I don't need to know it. I just need to know someone else who knows it so they can do it, not me.
Mm.
You know, and that helped a lot. But when I was able to take myself down to, I know nothing, and I'm okay with that. It kind of started to squash that. I still have bad hair days, don't get me wrong, but but it definitely squashed it a lot, and that was helpful. But I think, you know, that's a great point, Brian. And I think even even more so, I mean, all over the world, yes, of course, but Los Angeles sells a vision. It sells a brand. It sells a image. And there's that expectation that you will fill into that. And if you don't, then that mini me is always saying you're a failure. So thank you.
Yeah, you're again, I think you're, Brian, that's spot on. So the nature of the mini-me or the narrative self is always like contraction. It's there's always this like tightness and yeah, there's associated with that tightness, there's fear and this sense of needing to control things and, you know, protect oneself and so on. So it's so in the opposite is this sense of like openness and release and connectedness. And just like you said, rather than, you know, oh, I have to know all the answers and I got to go do it my own, which is very much the mindset of our Western culture, you know, which is super individualistic, and we have to be so strong and so independent. And there's like so much tightness around that. Whereas, like you said, if we can realize, well, there's other people who can help and who know things and that I can delegate to, and I don't have to be so tight. I can just open up and allow and accept, and there can be more spaciousness around the sense of who I am. That can really change things, and it can be, you know, it can be small steps in that direction, because every time, as soon as we're in a situation where we feel threatened or attacked or whatever it is, then we just contract back into the mini me. It's we just completely identify with it, and it all becomes so tight and claustrophobic and small. So whatever we can do to just open up and maybe identify more with that space rather than the small self, we can identify with a much larger self, which is just that open space of awareness that that, you know, to the degree we can say that we're anything, then, you know, maybe that's what we are, that open spaciousness of awareness that allows for everything to happen rather than anything that's going on within that space.
So I really backed off of meditating for a while, because it became a habit and not in a good way. Where, you know, I could you know, sit on a cushion, or great example, in a doctor's office, and they took my blood pressure and it was somewhat elevated. I'm like, oh, hold on just 1 second. Took a couple of cleansing breaths, and they took it again. And they go, wow, how'd you do that? Great parlor trick, you know? And that's exactly what it was. It was like I felt like I had been meditating for so long that the purpose behind it became more ego filled. It did because of what I was trying, or, you know, and I think maybe sometimes there's a lot of people who run into that rut, but it's not really something that's talked about ever. So I'm totally open.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, some of the biggest egos there are spiritual egos. You know, like one of my teachers once said, too holy too soon. And I mean, they're all, you know, the mini-me can appropriate absolutely anything in the service of solidifying itself. So meditation just becomes a way of self-improvement, and the self-improvement just becomes a way of entrenching the illusion of a separate self even more. So which is a tricky trap of any spirituality and any meditation practice. Like how do we make sure that we're not just doing this to polish our ego off and make it a better one that's that's now also holy and spiritual, and which just turns meditation into a trick. And that's, yeah, that's truly an open question. I'm not sure I know how to stay clear of that trap myself, to be honest.
You're doing a great job. Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Okay, so I'm pondering. I have to confess up here, I'm influenced quite heavily by more of a Vedic approach. And certainly looking at the issue of who am I, and knowing I'm not my body, I'm not my mind, that there's something beyond. And with Buddhism, I'm wondering if that beyond is Buddha nature. So that's, just something I ponder. Then the other aspect of this is, I would love to know, it sounds like in Buddhism, there's no individuality. And, are we just kind of one big smush? I'm just not clear about this. And so I just get really, really confused. I can kind of accept the concept of emptiness. Like I look out at my house and I go, okay, this is an illusion. Pray God, it's an illusion. And you have no idea what it looks like. So, but it's just like, and I have spent a lot of time doing a process looking at who am I, right? And I get the sense that I'm connected as a divine being with other divine beings, like your kind selves out there. I'm not clear about what that connection is exactly, but I feel quite positive about that connection. And I like the emphasis in Buddhism of analyzing and looking at, okay, how am I being compassionate or not compassionate, and working on that. And because that's our whole interconnection is where I'm up to. So I would love to hear anybody's comments about this. And if you want to just go ahead and tell me, what's beyond the ego, I'd love to hear it. I don't feel like don't hold back. I don't feel like I'm hanging on to an ego. Like I say, there seems to be, I have some sense of being, my terminology would be divine. Yeah. Connected to all you other nice divine beings. Okay.
So I think I would say that's certainly a much more realistic view of who you are, that divine being, and so I mean in the initial teachings of the Buddha, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the idea of no self was really emphasized, and then moving along to the third turning of the wheel of the Dharma, then the idea of Buddha nature was introduced. And so whereas emptiness and no self are negatives, I mean they're pointing to the absence of something, then the teachings of Buddha nature is actually pointing to a positive, like our true nature, and in a sense what we really are. But the problem is that our conceptual minds want that to be something, and even if you talk about unity, like we are all one, again, just like with the with the Milky Way, whatever you say is one, that one will only be a conceptual idea, designation, and not something that's actually reality based. So the problem is going beyond saying that it doesn't exist, but it's also going beyond saying that it does exist. So and that's where we get into trouble because the conceptual mind can't grasp something that neither not exists nor exists. It can't grasp something that is neither separate nor one, because we are neither separate and also are we not one. So it's yeah. So there's this, I don't know where this quote comes from, but it's the quote is that wisdom tells me I'm nothing, and love tells me I'm everything. And between those two, my life flows, something to that extent. And
Very nice. Very nice.
yeah, but I at the same time, I think it's a more realistic view of who you are, to view yourself as a divine being, or in Buddhist terminology as a fully enlightened Buddha. And that's the tantric path of taking the results into the present and realizing that in fact you are already exactly that which you're aspiring to become. The only difference between you and a Buddha is that you don't realize that you are one. It's all available right now, but we're blocked from it because of the stories we tell about the mini me.
Thank you. That's very helpful, Martin.
That felt like a whole lot of blah blah blah. I hope there was something useful in that. Yeah, I realize when I speak about things like this, I'm just repeating things that I've heard, because it's it's so far from my own realization. So I'm just conveying what I've been told. So I hope some of that's useful.
As good as the resources that we surround ourselves with.
Yeah, and that's all sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I'm just very, very happy that there are teachers in this world like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa and so on, and whatever I heard from such great teachers, I'm just happy if I can pass on some of it.
I absolutely believe in the interconnectedness of all of us, whether it is a teardrop in an ocean. We are all interconnected together spiritually. And I'm not quite sure how to define that, or in the moment I have the great articulation for it. But there is a oneness, and it is always present.
So one metaphor that I like is the metaphor of the ocean and the waves. In case you've heard it. So if you look at the ocean, there will be individual waves, and it's completely correct to say that there are individual waves, and some of them are higher and lower, and some of them might be more beautiful than others and whatnot. So that's true. There are waves, but at the same time, the waves are just the ocean manifesting. So it's so in a sense, of course, there are individual mind streams and there are individual people, but they're in a sense arising from this ground of being, or Buddha nature, or primordial awareness, or whatever we might, the Dharmakaya. So that, I like that metaphor, but at the same time, then we end up reifying the ocean and thinking that, okay, so the ocean really exists. That's really a thing. Dharmakaya is really a thing. Buddha nature is really a thing. But then we fall into the extreme of being again. So it's, but I do like the metaphor of the waves and the ocean. That it can be very helpful.
I come in with something a little strange.
And I think that's your job usually.
I have a science background, and I've been looking at soil behavior and organisms in the soil. And I found out this week, it's not so new in science. It's maybe 6 years old, this discovery that bacteria in the soil have DNA which they just free up into the soil, and that DNA gets taken up by fungi. So it's like, so say the bacterium had resistance to I don't know, mercury, heavy metals. The fungus can just kind of pick that up and run with it the next day. So for anybody who has an interest in science, it's a very real, you can prove it. You can show it very, very easily. So, I mean, that's pretty interconnected right there, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
That's all I've got.
Yeah. I think maybe that's a good a note as any to end on. Yeah, we are all the product of, like I said, the entirety of all that's ever happened since the beginning of the universe. And everything we have picked up from others. There's like every single part of me, both my body and my mind, comes from others. The me consists solely of that which is not me. My entire body is completely changed in, what is it, 7 years, and my mind is a product of, if you have a Buddhist worldview, it's a product of beings in the past who are not me. I carry that karma, and it's also the product of the environment I grew up in, and the society I'm in, and all my ancestral baggage and whatever it is. But everything comes from sources that are not me. I'm completely 100% of that which is not me. I'm just a product of something that is not me, and yet we claim this super strong ownership to all of it, and it's not realistic. So yeah, maybe we can end there. We're fungi who are absorbing the DNA of bacteria. That's the metaphor of the day. yeah, so let's dedicate whatever positive energy arose from this session, and nurture whatever insights might have been had, and bring them into the world. And yeah, be curious about reality and yourself and others. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, everyone.